She looked me straight in the eyes, her tone sharp as glass. "You'll never see your grandkids." And those words cut deeper than any wound life had ever given me. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. As if decades of love, sacrifice, and family bonds meant nothing. That night, I sat in my quiet house, staring at the walls, wondering if I had just lost the future I dreamed of. The chance to hold little hands, to pass on family stories, to hear tiny voices call me Grandma. But life has a cruel sense of irony. Months later, the very woman who pushed me away showed up at my door, desperate. When my son first told me he was getting married again, I felt a cautious hope. He'd been through heartbreak before, and all I ever wanted was for him to find peace. He spoke about her with a spark in his eyes, the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. I wanted to believe she would bring light into his life. The first time we met, she was polite, too polite, smiles that didn't reach her eyes, conversations clipped, like she was checking a box rather than opening a door. I brushed it off. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she just needed time. After all, relationships between in-laws don't bloom overnight. So I tried. I showed up with small gifts for their new home, baked pies, offered help where I could. But no matter what I did, I felt like I was knocking on a locked door. Every invitation to spend time together was politely declined. Every conversation with her ended quickly, as if she had somewhere better to be. And then came the moment that would replay in my mind for weeks. I was sitting in their living room when she leaned forward, her voice cold, and said, "You'll never see your grandkids." Just like that. No warning, no explanation. My son sat beside her, silent, staring down at his hands as though he'd lost his voice. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Do you know what it feels like when someone steals your future in a single breath? For years, I had dreamed of grandchildren, rocking them to sleep, passing on family recipes, teaching them the little lessons of life. And now all of that vanished. I left quietly, didn't argue, didn't plead. But when I got home, I let myself break. I cried until the house echoed with it. I wondered what I had done wrong. Was I overbearing? Did I fail him somehow as a mother? Or had she simply decided that I was unnecessary, disposable? Days turned into weeks. Weeks stretched into months. No phone calls, no visits. My heart sank every time I saw a stroller in the park or heard a child's laughter in the grocery store. I started to accept that maybe my role in their lives was over before it even began. I told myself I had lost not only the grandchildren I hadn't met, but also my son, the boy I once cradled in my arms, the man I had cheered for through every milestone. But life, it doesn't stay still for long. And sometimes the story shifts when you least expect it. It was a Thursday evening, heavy with rain. I remember because the storm rattled the windows as I folded laundry in silence. Then the phone rang. When I saw her name, I nearly didn't answer. My heart clenched. Why would she be calling me? But curiosity and something deeper, maternal instinct maybe, made me pick up. Her voice was thin, trembling. I need help. I almost dropped the phone. Those were the last words I ever expected from her. She explained quickly, almost breathless. My son had been called away for a sudden work trip. The two toddlers were sick, high fevers, crying nonstop, and she was alone. She said she hadn't slept in 2 days, hadn't eaten properly, and she was terrified something would happen to the kids. And then she admitted, almost like it hurt her to say it, "You were the only one I could think of." And for a moment I froze. Her words from months earlier came flooding back. "You'll never see your grandkids." The sting of rejection burned fresh. A part of me wanted to say, "Figure it out yourself." But another part, stronger, deeper, was already on its feet. Because those were my grandchildren. Whether or not she wanted me, they were mine too. When I arrived at their home, the scene broke my heart. Toys scattered everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, the sour smell of fever lingering in the air. She sat on the couch with the two little ones, both flushed and crying, her hair disheveled, her face pale with exhaustion. In that moment, she wasn't the cold woman who had shut me out. She was just a mother at her breaking point. Without a word, I took the baby into my arms. His forehead was hot, but as I rocked him gently and hummed, his cries softened. I made soup, cleaned up the kitchen, and laid fresh towels on the couch. She watched me, wide-eyed, as if she couldn't quite believe I had shown up. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of surrender. That night I stayed. I monitored the fevers, changed damp sheets, comforted little ones through their restless sleep. And when the storm outside finally cleared, I realized something. Sometimes love finds its way back in through the cracks of desperation. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and forgiving after the storm. I was sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee when she walked in. Her eyes were red, not just from exhaustion, but from something deeper. She looked smaller, fragile, as though the armor she wore every day had cracked wide open overnight. She sat down across from me, and for the first time since I had known her, there was no distance, no coolness, just a tired woman, stripped of pride. "I didn't know what else to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle it all, but I can't." I listened, and for once I didn't rush to fill the silence. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words," she went on, explaining how lonely motherhood had been, how she had pushed me away not out of hate, but out of fear. Fear that I would judge her or overshadow her role. She said she wanted to be seen as capable, as strong, but instead she had trapped herself in an impossible standard. Her confession stunned me. All those months I thought she despised me, when in truth, she had been battling her own insecurities. I told her softly, being strong doesn't mean doing it all alone. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we need help. Her eyes welled with tears. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. "I said awful things to you, things I can't take back." "I don't deserve your help." And in that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could hold on to bitterness, let her words continue to poison the bond between us, or I could let them go. So I reached across the table, laid my hand over hers, and said, "You don't have to deserve it. Family isn't about earning love. It's about giving it, even when it's hard." Something shifted between us then. The wall she had built so carefully started to crumble, brick by brick. That day I stayed a little longer. We laughed, awkward at first, but real. I helped her with laundry, showed her an old trick for calming fussy babies, even shared stories about my son, her husband, that she'd never heard before. She listened, really listened, and for the first time I saw warmth in her eyes when she looked at me. Later that week, she called me again, not out of desperation this time, but out of choice. She asked if I'd like to join them for dinner. It wasn't perfect. The conversation had its stops and starts, but it was something, a step toward healing. I thought back to that cruel sentence, "You'll never see your grandkids." How final it had sounded, how permanent. Yet here I was sitting at their table, spooning mashed potatoes onto my grandson's plate, listening to him giggle as peas rolled onto the floor. Life, I realized, has a way of rewriting even the harshest words, if we allow it. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, a rhythm formed. I became part of their lives, not as an intruder, not as an outsider, but as a grandmother, a helper, a steady presence. One afternoon, while watching the children play in the yard, she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. I didn't understand what family meant until now. I thought it was about control, about proving myself, but it's really about this, about showing up. Her words touched me, but more than that, they healed something inside me. For so long I had carried the weight of rejection. Now I felt the lightness of belonging again. My grandchildren began to know me, not just as the lady who brought cookies, but as someone who told bedtime stories, who kissed scraped knees, who clapped the loudest at their tiny victories. And every time I looked into their eyes, I thought, this is worth every tear I cried, every lonely night I endured. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, she poured us both tea. The house was quiet, peaceful. She looked at me, her expression soft, and said, "I know I hurt you. I can't erase that. But I want to build something new between us, if you'll let me." I nodded, not because I had forgotten her words, but because I had outgrown them. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing the future. And then she added, almost shyly, "The kids, they adore you. I don't know what we'd do without you." Tears blurred my vision. For months I had begged life, in my prayers, in my quiet moments, to give me a place in their lives. And here it was, not as a demand but as an offering. Looking back, I see now that the story wasn't about being shut out. It was about finding my way back in. Not through force, not through bitterness, but through patience, compassion, and love that refused to give up. So when I hear those tiny voices call me Grandma, I don't just hear a name, I hear redemption. I hear a promise that no cruel word, no cold wall can truly erase the bonds of family. Because in the end, love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just waits for the right moment to return. And so, what began with rejection ended with something far more powerful, renewal. I learned that even the harshest words can be rewritten with patience, humility, and love that refuses to quit. If you've ever felt pushed aside by family, remember this. The story isn't over yet. Sometimes the coldest winters lead to the warmest springs. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe. Share this with someone who needs hope today, and join me for more stories about family, forgiveness, and the lessons we learn as we grow older. Because after all, none of us are truly alone. We just need to find our way back to each other.